Vanessa Sterling cut through the maid's waist-length hair in front of the entire household, expecting tears, humiliation, and a desperate apology. Instead, Ivy Bennett looked up at her and smiled. Long strands of dark chestnut hair slid across Ivy's shoulders and fell into her trembling lap. Vanessa stood behind her with a pair of silver scissors in one hand, wearing the quiet satisfaction of a woman who believed no one in the mansion could challenge her. "Maybe now," Vanessa said loudly enough for every servant and bodyguard to hear, "you will finally remember your place." No one moved. The housekeepers lowered their eyes. The senior butler stared straight ahead, his face rigid with shame. Even the armed guards near the marble staircase remained silent. Everyone knew Vanessa was engaged to Dante Morelli, the most feared Mafia boss in New York, and opposing the woman expected to become his wife could cost far more than a job. Ivy remained kneeling on the polished floor while the severed locks gathered around her knees. She did not cry. She did not beg. She calmly picked up a strand of hair and ran it between her fingers, remembering how her grandmother had once brushed those same waves and told her that a woman's dignity did not come from beauty, wealth, or the approval of powerful people. It came from knowing who she was when others tried to break her. Vanessa's smile began to fade. For several long seconds, the grand hall was so silent that every unsteady breath could be heard. Then Ivy rose, turned around, and gently removed the scissors from Vanessa's hand. The bodyguards tensed. The servants stared, but Ivy showed no anger. With calm, deliberate movements, she gathered the damaged hair over one shoulder and cut the remaining length herself, allowing it to fall at Vanessa's feet. "You made one mistake," Ivy said, her voice soft but steady. "You believed my dignity was something you could cut away." Before Vanessa could respond, the mansion's enormous front doors opened. Dante Morelli entered with 6 armed men behind him. His cold gaze moved from the hair scattered across the marble floor to the scissors in Ivy's hand, then finally to his fiancée. The entire room stopped breathing. Vanessa rushed toward him. "Damien, she threatened me." But Damien did not look at Vanessa. He looked at Ivy, and when he saw the small silver pendant around her neck, the one belonging to the woman who had saved his life 10 years earlier, the most feared Mafia boss in New York went completely still. She cut away the remaining length herself, until every strand rested just below her chin. She looked directly into Vanessa's eyes. "You just made a mistake you'll never understand." Then she handed the scissors back, smoothed the wrinkles from her maid's apron, and quietly returned to work. No one inside the Morelli estate realized that before the week was over, the mansion that seemed impossible to shake would begin collapsing, not because of violence, betrayal, or rival mafia families, but because the one woman everyone had overlooked finally stopped giving more than anyone had ever asked. Long before sunrise painted the eastern sky, one light was always visible inside the Morelli estate. It came from the servants' kitchen. Every morning at exactly 4:30, Ivy Bennett unlocked the side entrance, carrying a weathered canvas bag that had belonged to her grandmother. She greeted the sleepy security guard by name, asked whether his daughter's fever had improved, and quietly placed a cup of fresh coffee beside him before disappearing deeper into the mansion. Nobody had instructed her to do that. She simply remembered. Remembering people had always been Ivy's quiet gift. She remembered birthdays that employees themselves forgot. She remembered which gardener suffered from arthritis whenever rain was coming. She remembered that the youngest dishwasher secretly hated mushrooms, but was too embarrassed to complain. She remembered which bodyguards preferred black coffee after overnight patrols, and which chefs became anxious before hosting diplomatic dinners. To strangers, she was merely another maid. To those who had worked inside the estate for years, she was something impossible to describe. She was the invisible thread holding hundreds of daily moments together. The Morelli estate stretched across acres of manicured gardens overlooking the Atlantic coastline. It resembled a luxury resort more than a private residence, employing nearly 80 people across housekeeping, security, landscaping, maintenance, transportation, administration, and hospitality. Everything appeared effortless. Crystal chandeliers sparkled. Gardens bloomed in perfect symmetry. Luxury cars waited, polished outside the entrance. Guests praised the flawless service. No visitor ever saw the tiny disasters prevented before breakfast. That was Ivy's work. When a chauffeur overslept after working 3 consecutive night shifts, Ivy quietly arranged another driver before anyone noticed. When imported flowers arrived damaged, she redesigned the arrangements herself using blooms from the greenhouse. When a nervous young maid accidentally broke antique china, worth thousands of dollars, Ivy stayed late to earn extra money, until the replacement could be purchased anonymously. No reports, no recognition, no complaints, just solutions. The older employees often exchanged knowing glances whenever someone praised how smoothly the estate operated. They knew the truth. The mansion wasn't running because of expensive systems or strict management. It ran because Ivy noticed every problem before it became someone else's. Around 7 each morning, the staff gathered briefly before beginning their assigned duties. The elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, watched Ivy moving quietly between departments, checking schedules while carrying fresh linens balanced effortlessly in her arms. One of the newer employees whispered, "How does she know where everyone is all the time?" Mrs. Carter smiled. "Because she pays attention when everyone else is busy being important." The younger maid frowned. "But she's just housekeeping, Mrs." Carter's expression softened. "No, dear. Housekeeping is her job. Caring for this place is who she is." Few people understood where that devotion came from. Years earlier, after Ivy's parents died in a highway accident, she had been raised by her grandmother in a small coastal town. They had little money, but never lacked kindness. Her grandmother brushed Ivy's long hair every evening while repeating the same words. "Hair grows because hope grows. As long as you care for both, no one can truly take your dignity." When illness finally claimed the older woman, Ivy kept growing her hair, not out of vanity, but because every inch reminded her of the only home she had ever known. She carried those memories with her into every difficult day. Most employees never knew. She never talked about herself. She listened instead. That was why frightened new workers somehow found themselves confiding in her after only a few conversations. She never judged, never gossiped, never repeated anyone's secrets. Even Dante Morelli had noticed her, though only in passing. The feared Mafia boss spent most of his life negotiating multi-million-dollar shipping contracts, resolving conflicts between powerful families, and protecting an empire built over decades. Weeks often passed without him spending more than a single evening at his own estate. Whenever he returned, everything appeared exactly as it should. Dinner arrived on time. Meetings flowed smoothly. Guests departed impressed. He naturally assumed that was simply how the household functioned. He had no idea someone was quietly ensuring it. Occasionally, as he crossed the foyer before another business trip, he would nod toward Ivy. "Thank you. Everything looks perfect." She always smiled politely. "My pleasure, sir." The exchange lasted only seconds. Yet, someone else noticed every one of them. Vanessa Sterling, elegant, beautiful, born into one of the state's most influential political families, officially engaged to Dante for nearly a year. She understood wealth. She understood appearances. She understood power. But she did not understand why the most feared man on the East Coast occasionally thanked a plus-size maid with genuine respect. At first, she dismissed it. Then, she began watching. Every quiet compliment, every small nod, every moment Dante acknowledged Ivy's work without even realizing he was doing it. A tiny seed of jealousy took root. It grew slowly, silently, patiently, and by the time Dante left for a week-long negotiation with rival Mafia families in Chicago, Vanessa had already convinced herself of something that wasn't true. She believed Ivy Bennett wasn't simply a maid. She believed she was competition. Vanessa smiled as she watched Dante's convoy disappear beyond the estate gates. For the next 7 days, she would be the one in charge. The morning after Dante Morelli departed for Chicago, the atmosphere inside the estate changed almost immediately. For years, the household had followed an unspoken rhythm built on cooperation. Every department trusted the others. Problems were solved quietly before they reached management. It was an efficient system created not through fear, but through mutual respect. Vanessa Sterling intended to replace that culture with obedience. She summoned every department head to the main drawing room. Dressed elegantly in an ivory designer suit, she stood beneath an enormous crystal chandelier, with the confidence of someone who believed authority could simply be inherited. While Dante is away, she announced, "All decisions come through me. I expect perfection, loyalty, and absolute discipline." No one challenged her. The senior employees exchanged silent glances. Mrs. Carter lowered her eyes. The head gardener sighed quietly. Even the security captain simply nodded. They all understood one thing. 7 days could feel very long. Within hours, Vanessa began making changes. Several long-time servants were reassigned to less desirable duties. A new personal assistant arrived from her family's estate and immediately started criticizing procedures that had worked flawlessly for years. Employees were ordered to seek approval for even the smallest decisions. The mansion became quieter, not calmer, just quieter. People had stopped speaking freely. Only Ivy continued her work, exactly as before. She greeted everyone. With the same gentle smile, she prepared breakfast trays. She helped a nervous young maid learn the proper silverware arrangement. She reminded the pastry chef that one of the visiting diplomats was allergic to almonds. She never questioned Vanessa's authority. She simply focused on helping wherever she could. To Ivy, kindness had never depended on who was in charge. 3 days later, the estate prepared for an important diplomatic dinner. Several influential investors, politicians, and business partners would attend before Dante's return. Vanessa considered the evening her opportunity to prove she was already capable of managing the Morelli household. Every flower arrangement was inspected, every wine glass measured, every chair positioned with mathematical precision. The dining hall resembled a masterpiece, until Ivy noticed one small mistake. At the center of the table, the seating cards for 2 rival businessmen had accidentally been switched. Most people would never have recognized the problem. Ivy did. She remembered their history from a banquet nearly 2 years earlier. Those 2 men had refused to sit beside one another after a bitter legal dispute. If left unchanged, the mistake could embarrass the Morelli family before distinguished guests. She quietly approached Vanessa. "Miss Sterling," Ivy said softly, "I believe 2 place cards may have been exchanged by accident." Vanessa barely looked at her. "They're correct. I only thought I didn't ask what you thought." Ivy hesitated. "I apologize. I only wanted to prevent an uncomfortable situation." Before Vanessa could respond, one of the estate managers walked past, noticed the arrangement, and immediately frowned. "Oh," he quickly exchanged the 2 cards. "Good catch." He smiled politely toward Ivy. "Thank you." The correction took less than 5 seconds, but for Vanessa, it lasted forever. She saw several employees glance toward Ivy with quiet admiration. In her mind, clear as throat, the maid had corrected her publicly. The dinner itself proceeded successfully. The guests never knew how close the evening had come to awkward disaster. Vanessa smiled throughout the event. She laughed gracefully. She accepted compliments. Yet beneath the polished exterior, humiliation simmered into resentment. After the final guests departed and the staff began cleaning the ballroom, Vanessa called everyone into the grand hall. Her voice echoed through the marble corridors. "I have something that needs to be addressed." Nearly every employee gathered. Housekeepers, chefs, the drivers, gardeners, security personnel, No one understood why they had been summoned so late. Vanessa walked slowly toward Ivy. "You seem to enjoy making corrections." Ivy looked genuinely confused. "I was only trying to help." "Help?" Vanessa laughed coldly. "Or were you trying to impress Dante?" A ripple of discomfort spread through the room. Ivy blinked. "I would never. Don't lie." Vanessa stepped closer. "I've watched the way he thanks you. I've watched you pretending to be modest. You think because you're useful, you're important." The accusation stunned everyone. Ivy lowered her eyes. "Miss Sterling, I have never wanted anything except to do my work well." "Your work?" Vanessa's gaze settled on Ivy's long chestnut hair. "It certainly seems you've taken excellent care of your appearance." Without warning, Vanessa reached toward a nearby supply cart. Someone had left a pair of heavy tailoring scissors after unpacking decorative linens. She picked them up. Mrs. Carter gasped. "Miss Sterling." The older woman instinctively stepped forward. One sharp look from Vanessa stopped her. "You forget who you're speaking to." Silence swallowed the whole. Vanessa grabbed a handful of Ivy's hair. For the first time, fear appeared in Ivy's eyes. Not because of pain, because she instantly remembered her grandmother. Every evening, every gentle braid, every promise that dignity could survive hardship. The blades closed. A harsh metallic snap echoed across the marble floor. Then another. Then another. Thick strands of chestnut hair slipped from Vanessa's hand and drifted slowly onto Ivy's apron. No one moved. Several maids covered their mouths to stop themselves from crying. A young gardener clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. The security captain stared straight ahead, knowing that intervening against the boss's fiancée could cost everyone their livelihoods. Vanessa finally released the remaining uneven hair. "There," she smiled. "Now, perhaps you'll remember your place." For several endless seconds, the entire mansion seemed to stop breathing. Ivy slowly knelt. She gathered every lock of hair with extraordinary care, almost as though she were picking up pieces of her past. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but none fell. Instead, she stood, reached gently toward Vanessa, and said only 3 words. "The scissors, please." Vanessa, momentarily confused, handed them over. Without trembling, without anger, without raising her voice, Ivy lifted the blades and cut away the rest of her hair herself. Short even, practical. When the final strand fell, she placed the scissors carefully on the nearby table. She looked directly at Vanessa. There was no hatred in her expression, only quiet disappointment. "You just made a mistake you'll never understand." Then she bowed, politely. "Excuse me." She picked up her cleaning cart and calmly walked away. Behind her, more than 70 employees remained frozen, in complete silence. No applause, no shouting, no protest. Only the unbearable realization that something precious inside the Morelli estate had just been broken, and none of them yet understood how much that single act of cruelty would cost them all. The following morning, Ivy Bennett arrived at the estate at exactly 4:30, just as she had every day for the past 4 years. The only difference was her hair. Where a thick braid had once rested against her back, short chestnut strands now framed her face. Every employee she passed paused for a moment, before quietly lowering their eyes. No one mentioned what had happened. No one dared. Ivy greeted the security guard with her usual gentle smile, signed the attendant's ledger, collected her cleaning supplies, and began her assigned duties. She dusted the west corridor, changed the linens in the guest suites, polished the marble staircase, restocked towels in the private spa. Everything listed in her job description was completed with the same care as always. Nothing more. At first, no one noticed. Mrs. Carter almost asked Ivy whether she could help train a nervous new housemate, as she always did. The request stopped on her lips. She remembered. That had never been Ivy's responsibility. It had simply been another kindness she offered without being asked. By lunchtime, the first cracks began to appear. A new kitchen assistant accidentally prepared mushroom soup for a senior accountant with a severe allergy. Normally, Ivy would have noticed the menu while passing through the kitchen and quietly suggested a substitute before the meal was served. This time, she walked past, not because she was angry, because she was carrying fresh towels to the second floor. The soup reached the dining room before the mistake was discovered. The chef spent 20 frantic minutes preparing a replacement. He looked toward the hallway where Ivy disappeared. Only then did he realize she had saved him from similar mistakes dozens of times before. That afternoon, one of the chauffeurs arrived nearly 40 minutes late to collect an important attorney from the airport. He had mistakenly copied the wrong departure time onto his schedule. Normally, Ivy compared transportation logs every morning while delivering coffee to the administrative office. She caught scheduling conflicts almost instinctively. Today, she never entered the office. It wasn't part of her job. The attorney waited. The delay embarrassed the estate. By evening, the atmosphere felt strangely unfamiliar. Nothing catastrophic had happened, yet nothing felt effortless anymore. The mansion no longer moved with quiet harmony. Instead, every department struggled alone. The following day brought even more confusion. Fresh flowers intended for an elderly charity board were delivered to the private library instead of the reception hall. The rare orchids, reserved for a diplomatic guest, remained forgotten inside the greenhouse until they wilted under the afternoon sun. The florist blamed housekeeping. Housekeeping blamed administration. Administration blamed the delivery team. Arguments that had never existed before suddenly became common. No one recognized the missing link connecting everything together. Ivy had never managed those departments. She had simply spoken to people. She reminded, suggested, noticed. Now she did none of those things. Late that afternoon, a young maid burst into tears after breaking an expensive crystal vase while cleaning the music room. Several months earlier, Ivy would have quietly comforted her, helped gather the shattered pieces, and found a solution before management even heard about the accident. Instead, Ivy walked into the room, saw the broken glass, and calmly asked, "Has your supervisor been informed?" The frightened girl nodded through tears. "Yes." Ivy offered a sympathetic smile. "I'm sorry that happened." Then she picked up her cleaning cart and continued down the hallway. The young maid stared after her in disbelief, not because Ivy had become cold, because for the first time Ivy had allowed someone else to carry the weight of their own mistake. That evening, Mrs. Carter found Ivy eating dinner alone in the staff cafeteria. The older woman sat across from her. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Mrs. Carter whispered, "My dear, you've become very quiet." Ivy looked down at her untouched cup of tea. "I've always been quiet." "No, you've always been kind." The words lingered between them. Mrs. Carter reached across the table. "You don't have to carry this alone." A faint smile touched Ivy's lips. "I'm not carrying anything. I'm simply doing the work I was hired to do. Nothing more, nothing less." Mrs. Carter's eyes filled with tears. She understood exactly what Ivy meant. The estate had spent years accepting gifts that were never part of her salary. Her patience, her memory, her compassion, her willingness to solve problems that belonged to everyone else. Now those gifts had quietly disappeared. No one had appreciated them until they were gone. 3 days after the incident, the head of security stormed into the operations office. 2 patrol teams had accidentally been assigned to the same section of the property, while another entrance remained completely uncovered for nearly an hour. Fortunately, no security threat occurred. Still, the mistake was unprecedented. The captain reviewed every document twice. Everything appeared correct. Only later did he remember that Ivy usually carried updated shift notes between departments whenever schedules changed at the last minute. She had never been asked. She had simply noticed that paperwork often moved too slowly. Across the estate, similar realizations unfolded. The gardeners suddenly remembered Ivy bringing bottles of water during summer heat waves. The laundry staff recalled how she reorganized delivery carts whenever someone called in sick. The night guards realized she always prepared sandwiches before overnight storms because restaurants outside the estate closed early. None of those actions had ever been required. She had simply cared. And now, she still cared. But she no longer believed it was her place to interfere. By the 5th day, even Vanessa began noticing the difference. She walked through the mansion, expecting flawless service. Instead, she found anxious employees rushing through unfinished tasks. The breakfast room had opened 10 minutes late. Fresh linens had been delivered to the wrong guest suites. An important package intended for Dante's private office remained unopened because no one realized it had arrived. Vanessa called an emergency staff meeting. Her voice echoed sharply through the hall. "What is happening to this household?" No one answered. She demanded explanations. The department managers blamed one another. The chefs blamed housekeeping. Housekeeping blamed scheduling. Scheduling blamed transportation. The room filled with accusations. Standing quietly near the back, Ivy listened without speaking. For years, she would have stepped forward with calm suggestions, gently connecting each department until everyone understood how to fix the problem. Now she remained silent, not out of revenge, out of respect. She had finally accepted that doing everyone else's work had never truly been her responsibility. Vanessa's eyes swept across the room before stopping on Ivy. For a brief moment, she expected the maids to offer another solution, another rescue, another miracle. Ivy simply lowered her notebook after recording her cleaning assignments. Nothing else. Vanessa dismissed the meeting in frustration. As the employees slowly filed out, an elderly gardener quietly murmured to Mrs. Carter, I thought, removing her hair would humiliate her. Mrs. Carter watched Ivy disappear down the corridor. No, they only removed what everyone could see. What they failed to notice was everything she had been carrying that no one else ever did, far beyond the estate walls. Dante Morelli's convoy was already making its return journey home. None of the people waiting for him realized that within the next 24 hours, the boss would notice something no one had been able to hide. Not the missing flowers, not the scheduling errors, not the delayed meals. He would notice the silence. And once Dante Morelli started asking questions, someone would finally have to answer. Late Friday afternoon, the iron gates of the Morelli estate swung open. A convoy of black SUVs rolled slowly up the long stone driveway, escorted by armed security vehicles. Employees, standing near the entrance, instinctively straightened their posture. Dante Morelli had returned. For most people, his arrival inspired a mixture of admiration and fear. He possessed the calm confidence of a man whose decisions shaped the lives of thousands. Rivals feared his intelligence more than his power, because he rarely needed to raise his voice to command absolute obedience. As he stepped from the lead vehicle, he paused. Something felt different. Not wrong. Heavy. The mansion had always welcomed him with a quiet sense of order. Even after exhausting business trips, he could walk through the entrance and immediately feel that every detail had already been handled. Today, the silence felt strained. Employees greeted him respectfully, but few met his eyes. The butler's smile looked forced. Two young housemaids exchanged nervous glances before quickly looking away. Even several veteran capos, men who had negotiated with dangerous crime families without blinking, appeared unusually uncomfortable. Dante noticed everything. He simply said nothing. Instead, he continued walking. Inside the grand foyer, Vanessa greeted him with a bright smile and an affectionate embrace. "You must be exhausted." "It was productive," Dante replied. She immediately began describing the successful diplomatic dinner she had hosted, the improvements she had made throughout the estate, and the efficiency of the household during his absence. Dante listened politely. yet his attention kept drifting elsewhere. Small imperfections surrounded him. A painting in the west corridor hung slightly crooked. Fresh lilies in the entrance hall had begun to wilt. A security report rested unopened on a side table. Individually, none of those details mattered. Together, they formed a pattern. This house never overlooked details. Someone had stopped seeing them. As they walked toward his office, a familiar voice quietly greeted him. "Welcome home, Mr. Morelli." Dante turned. For a brief second, he failed to recognize her. Ivy Bennett stood holding a basket of freshly folded linens. Her posture remained the same. Her gentle smile remained the same, but her long chestnut hair was gone. Short waves rested just beneath her jawline. Dante slowed to a stop. "Ivy." She inclined her head respectfully. "It's good to have you back, sir." He studied her for a moment. "You changed your hair." She touched it almost absent-mindedly. "Yes, I wanted a change." Her answer came smoothly. Too smoothly. During the years he had known Ivy, Dante had developed an unusual confidence in reading people. It was one of the reasons his empire had survived countless betrayals. People lied with words. Truth lived elsewhere, in their eyes, their breathing, their silence. Ivy was lying, not maliciously, protectively. He nodded once. "It suits you." A faint smile crossed her face. "Thank you." She excused herself and continued down the hallway. Dante watched until she disappeared around the corner. Then he turned toward Vanessa. "When did she cut her hair?" Vanessa shrugged casually. "A few days ago." "Why?" "I suppose women get bored." The answer felt empty. He said nothing more. That evening, Dante reviewed business reports in his study, but his concentration drifted repeatedly toward the unusual atmosphere inside the estate. Twice, meetings started late, because documents had been misplaced. Dinner arrived almost 15 minutes behind schedule. A guest bedroom prepared for an overnight visitor lacked fresh towels. These were mistakes he had never seen before. Near midnight, he called the estate manager into his office. The middle-aged administrator entered looking unusually tense. "Has something changed while I was away?" The manager hesitated. "No, sir. Everything is under control." Dante closed the folder in front of him. "I've spent 20 years negotiating with men who built entire criminal organizations on deception." He looked directly at the manager. "I know when someone isn't telling me everything." Silence. The manager swallowed hard. Finally, he answered carefully. "The staff has been adjusting." "To what?" Another pause. "The changes." "What changes?" The man lowered his eyes. "I don't think it's my place to say." Dante dismissed him without another word. That answer troubled him far more than any explanation could have. The next morning, he began asking questions quietly. Not as a mafia boss, as an observer. He spoke with the head chef while inspecting the kitchens. The chef praised the staff, but admitted mistakes had become strangely frequent. What changed? The chef sighed. "I honestly don't know." He hesitated. Or perhaps he stopped himself. Dante waited. "Go on." The chef shook his head. "It isn't my story to tell." Later, Dante walked through the gardens with the landscaping supervisor. The elderly man admitted flower deliveries had become increasingly disorganized. "Again?" Dante asked. "Why?" Again came nearly the same answer. "I don't believe I should say." Throughout the afternoon, conversation after conversation followed the same pattern. Nobody lied. Nobody blamed anyone. Nobody mentioned Vanessa. Instead, every employee unknowingly pointed toward a single uncomfortable truth. Ever since Ivy Bennett helping beyond her assigned responsibilities, everything had begun falling apart. The realization unsettled Dante more than he expected. He had never instructed Ivy to coordinate departments, never promoted her, never assigned additional authority. Yet, somehow the entire household had relied upon her invisible efforts. How had he never noticed? That evening, he found Clear's throat. Ivy arranging fresh towels outside the guest wing. She worked, quietly, just as she always had. Ivy. She turned. "Sir, I've spoken with several department heads today." She remained silent. They all seemed to miss something. A gentle smile appeared. "I'm sure everyone will settle into a new routine. Is that what you think?" "I believe people are capable of adapting." Dante studied her closely. "Were you unhappy here?" The question caught her by surprise. "No. Have I treated you unfairly?" She looked genuinely confused. "Never." "Then why does it feel like I've failed you?" For the first time, emotion flickered across Ivy's face. She lowered her eyes. "You've always treated me with respect, and yet..." She took a slow breath. Sometimes respect isn't enough if people only see what you do, and never what you quietly carry. She realized she had said too much. "I'm sorry. Please excuse me." She bowed politely and walked away before he could ask another question. Those words stayed with Dante long after Clear's throat. She disappeared. Late that night, unable to sleep, he wandered through the estate grounds. Near the greenhouse, he noticed the elderly head gardener trimming rose bushes beneath the moonlight. The old man had served the Morelli family for over 30 years. If anyone understood the soul of the estate, it was him. Dante approached quietly. "You've known Ivy a long time." The gardener nodded. "Since her first week." "Tell me something honestly." The old man rested both hands on his pruning shears. "What happened while I was gone?" For several long moments, only the sound of the evening wind filled the garden. Finally, the gardener spoke. "Sir, I've buried friends. I've watched this family survive wars between powerful men, but Clear's throat. I have never seen this house so ashamed." Dante felt his heartbeat slow. "Ashamed of what?" The old man's eyes glistened. Miss Sterling cut off Ivy's hair. The world seemed to stop. She did what? In front of everyone? The gardener's voice trembled. "Your grandmother always said a person's dignity should never be taken away before witnesses." Miss Ivy never cried. She finished cutting the rest herself. Then she returned to work the next morning as though nothing had happened. Dante stared into the darkness. His expression remained perfectly still. Only the tightening of his jaw revealed the storm beneath. The gardener continued softly. "She didn't punish us, sir. She simply stopped giving us everything she had been giving for free." A long silence followed. When Dante finally spoke, his voice was almost frighteningly calm. "Is greater than. Is greater than. Clear's throat. Is greater than. Is greater than. Thank you." The gardener nodded. As Dante turned toward the mansion, every member of his security team instinctively stepped aside. They had seen their boss angry before. They had seen him ruthless, but they had almost never seen him silent. Because everyone who knew Dante Morelli understood one thing: his quietest decisions were always his most devastating. And before another day passed, the entire Morelli estate would witness one of those decisions unfold before their own eyes. 2 days later, every employee at the Morelli estate received an unexpected invitation. Dante Morelli was hosting the annual estate appreciation banquet. The celebration usually honored the loyalty and hard work of the household staff. But this year's gathering had not been scheduled. Its sudden announcement sparked quiet curiosity throughout the mansion. Vanessa, however, interpreted it differently. Standing before a full-length mirror, while assistants adjusted her emerald evening gown, she smiled with satisfaction. Surely Dante wanted to celebrate her successful management of the estate. Perhaps, she thought, he would finally introduce her publicly as the future Lady Morelli. She never imagined that the evening had been arranged for an entirely different reason. By sunset, the grand ballroom glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Long tables overflowed with elegant dishes, prepared by the estate's finest chefs. Housekeepers sat beside gardeners. Drivers laughed with accountants. Security officers shared stories with kitchen staff. It was one of the rare evenings when rank disappeared. Only Vanessa noticed one unusual detail. Instead of sitting beside Dante at the head table, she had been seated one chair away. The place beside Dante remained empty. She frowned, but said nothing. Perhaps it was a surprise. When everyone had taken their seats, Dante slowly rose. The room fell silent immediately. He looked across the hundreds of familiar faces. Many had worked for his family for decades. Some had watched him grow from a quiet young man into one of the most powerful Mafia leaders on the East Coast. Tonight, however, he spoke not as a boss, but as the head of a family. I've spent many years believing this estate functioned because of discipline. He paused. I was wrong. The employees exchanged puzzled glances. Dante continued. I recently discovered that someone has been carrying responsibilities that were never listed in any contract. His gaze moved slowly through the room before stopping on Ivy. She sat quietly near the middle tables, clearly wishing no attention would fall upon her. Then Dante asked a single question. Who here has ever been helped by Ivy Bennett? Silence filled the ballroom. For one heartbeat, no one moved. Then Mrs. Carter slowly stood. She helped me after my husband passed away. I couldn't return to work. She quietly completed half my duties for nearly a month, without asking for recognition. Another chair scraped across the floor. The head chef stood. When my son was hospitalized, Miss Ivy prepared my morning inventory every day before I arrived, so I could spend more time with my family. A chauffeur rose next. She reminded me of my wedding anniversary. I would have forgotten. A gardener stood. She carried water to us during every summer heat wave. Then, a bodyguard. She always prepared sandwiches before overnight security shifts. Another and another. Housekeepers, laundry workers, receptionists, drivers, florists, electricians, maintenance crews, administrative assistants, senior capos. Even the estate physician slowly rose from his chair. Within moments, nearly the entire ballroom stood, dozens upon dozens of people. Everywhere Dante looked, employees remained standing with quiet gratitude in their eyes. Only one person remained seated, Vanessa. She looked around in stunned disbelief. How could a maid command this much loyalty? Dante allowed the silence to settle. Then he walked away from the head table. Instead of approaching Vanessa, he stopped beside Ivy. She instinctively began to stand. He gently motioned for her to remain seated. They told me, he said softly enough, for the room to hear every word, that you were only a maid. He paused. They forgot to tell me that you've been holding this family together. Tears immediately filled Ivy's eyes. She lowered her head, overwhelmed by a tension she had spent her entire life avoiding. Dante turned toward the gathered employees. I failed to notice the person who protected this home, while I was protecting everything outside it. For that, I owe Ivy Bennett an apology. The most feared Mafia boss on the East Coast inclined his head. Not dramatically, not symbolically, sincerely. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. Vanessa shot to her feet. Dante, you cannot be serious. She's an employee. He faced her calmly. No, she's family. Vanessa laughed bitterly. So, you're choosing a maid over your fiancé? I'm choosing character over cruelty. Her expression hardened. It was only hair. Dante's eyes became cold. No, it was dignity. You humiliated a loyal employee before witnesses. You abused authority to satisfy your jealousy. If you can do that to the weakest person in this house, you could one day do it to anyone. The room was perfectly still. Dante reached into his jacket pocket. Slowly, he removed the engagement ring Vanessa had given him during their formal announcement months earlier. He placed it carefully on the table between them. Our engagement ends tonight. Vanessa's face turned pale. You would destroy our family's alliance because of her? No, he answered quietly. You destroyed it yourself. Security approached respectfully. Not because Dante ordered Vanessa removed, but because she no longer belonged at the head of the Morelli family. Without another word, she gathered her purse and walked towards the ballroom doors. No one stopped her. No one defended her. For the first time in her life, money and influence could not purchase respect. As the doors closed behind her, the room remained silent. Then someone began clapping. Mrs. Carter, another joined, then another. Within seconds, the ballroom erupted into thunderous applause. Not for Dante, for Ivy. She covered her face, unable to stop the tears she had refused to shed days earlier. These were not tears of humiliation. They were tears of finally being seen. When the applause softened, Dante addressed the staff once more. Beginning today, we will establish an estate leadership council. It will ensure that no person's contribution is ever ignored again. He looked toward Ivy. I would like you to oversee staff welfare and household operations. The position is yours if you accept it. Ivy stared at him in disbelief. I'm just a maid, a gentle voice answered before Dante could speak. Mrs. Carter smiled through tears. No, my dear, you were never just a maid. You were the reason this place felt like home. The entire ballroom nodded in agreement. Months passed. The atmosphere inside the estate slowly returned. Only this time it was stronger. Departments communicated openly. Employees received proper recognition. No one was expected to carry invisible burdens alone. New staff members often smiled with surprise when the elegant woman welcoming them during orientation introduced herself. I'm Ivy. If you ever need help, please ask. Many later discovered that before every major family gathering, charity event, diplomatic reception, or important celebration, Dante requested only one opinion before making his final decision. Ivy's. Not because she held power, because she understood people. One quiet afternoon, they walked together through the estate gardens, where spring flowers bloomed beneath the warm sunlight. Dante stopped beside the old stone fountain, where the last light of evening shimmered across the water. There is something I have wanted to say for a long time, he said. Ivy looked at him with a gentle smile. I know. His gaze lowered for a moment. I am sorry. I should have seen the truth much sooner. I spent years believing strength was something loud, something powerful enough to make people obey. All that time, the strongest person in my home was the woman who carried everyone else without ever asking to be noticed. Ivy turned toward the roses moving softly in the breeze. My grandmother used to tell me that kindness does not lose its value simply because people fail to recognize it, she said. For a long time, I thought being patient meant staying silent. I thought love meant enduring whatever others placed on my shoulders. She looked back at him. But real love should never require someone to disappear. Dante met her eyes. And for once, there was no command in his expression, no authority, and no expectation that she would forgive him, simply because he had finally understood. You did not fall in love with me because of my hair, Ivy continued. You finally saw me because I stopped hiding behind it. When Vanessa cut it away, she believed she had humiliated me. Instead, she took away the last place I was using to hide. Dante stepped closer, but he did not touch her. I should have seen you long before that night, he whispered. Not because you saved this family, or because you endured what none of us noticed. I should have seen you simply because you were always worthy of being seen. He slowly offered his hand, giving her every opportunity to step away. Ivy looked at it for a moment. Then she placed her hand in his. Together, they continued along the garden path beneath the deepening evening sky. They no longer walked as a mafia boss and a maid, or as a powerful man leading a woman who had once served quietly in his home. They walked side by side, as two people who understood that love, built on admiration, could survive humiliation, that respect earned through sacrifice would always outlast power maintained through fear, and that forgiveness meant little unless it was followed by change. Behind them, the Morelli estate stood peaceful once more. Not because Ivy continued carrying everyone else in silence, but because her courage had taught the entire family to carry one another. Dante had spent his life building an empire that men feared losing. Ivy showed him how to build a home that people chose to protect. And as the garden lights slowly came alive around them, Dante understood that the greatest woman he had ever known had never needed his power to become strong. She had only needed him to become worthy of standing beside her.